200 kilometers off the coast of Italy, about the same coming up from North Africa. This is Sardinia. It's beautiful. The sun shines most of the year. What's not to love about this island? And yet people are leaving. The birth rate is plummeting, and that's causing major problems. Welcome to our program. And welcome to our Pinetu, our Sardinian shepherd's hut.
5, 4, 3.
Well, it's not just a Sardinian problem, it affects all of us all the way around the world. And we'll be looking into that in some detail during the course of this programme, Beyond Borders in Sardinia. It may be sunny outside, but it is a little chilly, hence the fire you can see in the background here. And we'll be talking to our first two guests in just a moment, both of them Sardinians, one who stayed and one who left. But let's hear from some other people we met when we took our camera around the island.
If you don't have a job, if you don't have money, if you're not healthy, you can't really do anything. You can't really do much.
You're giving them a passport to leave Sardinia.
Technically, I am. Even if, I'd really like them to stay here longer, but I can understand that.
C'ho un figlio che ha 400 pecore, è sempre solo in campagna, non rientra per niente.
You left, Francesco, you stayed, and your brother lives still here on the island in a town that's rapidly diminishing. Why did you feel you had to get out?
I was 18, so it was just the time I finished secondary school. And to be honest, I didn't really feel there were factors pushing me away from here, but there were things attracting me somewhere else. So I always struggle with the idea of living in an island and not feeling connected, if you like. I wanted to feel part of a bigger world, so that's the kind of reason I left in the first place.
What do you see when you come back to Sardinia?
I see a place that is rapidly changing, and I see a place where there's lots of older people and not so much young children anymore. And there's a place where many people would like to live.
Nice place to visit, but not a nice place to stay. Let me come to Francesco on this one, because you worked away for a long time, but you're now back here. You've got two very small children. What drew you back?
I was living in Dublin, so the weather there is not nice at all. And after 2 years of no summer, I decided to come back. That was one of the reasons. Also the food, the family, the nature, and the town where I live.
You say people are being selfish for not having children. Is that fair?
I think it's one of the reasons why the people they don't have children. One is because they're selfish. I think it's a common thing all over Italy, not just in Sardinia. The people, like my parents, they start to have children when they were like 25, 26. Now the people start to have children when they are 35 or older. I think they want to enjoy more their life because the children takes you time,
Okay, but Gianni Pes is a professor at Sassari University, and he discovered an area of this country where people do live to an incredibly ripe old age. He puts it down to the fact that there's good food, that they work hard, and that they have family protection, which he says may well be disappearing.
The most important social factors is the structure of the community, the fact that within this community, elderly people are not left alone, are not abandoned. They are not put in nursing homes, for example. They are kept in the family, and usually there is at least one member of the family who take care of elderly people. I'm afraid that now this habit is fading down, is disappearing progressively. So I'm not sure that in the future the level of longevity of this population will persist.
You know, what he told me, Francesca, was that he felt that within 10 years, as these very elderly people pass away and other older people come in, those new old people aren't going to have the same level of care because society's changing so much. Do you see that in your work?
Actually, it's a process that is affecting and is going to affect all advanced society, including countries outside Europe, like Southeastern Asia, where they're experiencing similarly low level of fertility at the moment. So families will become smaller, and I would say in all the world, but Europe is leading the way, followed by Latin America and
with
Southeast
falling
Asia.
birth rates.
Yeah, with falling birth rates. Families are not disappearing, they are changing, and we need to plan and to adjust to changing families.
Francesco, let me ask you, because you mentioned earlier that it wasn't just Sardinia, it was the whole of Italy. Now, the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, was very anti-migrant, but now she's saying we'd like to welcome more migrants into this country. But she's also saying we will pay you to have more children. We want to increase the birth rate. Is that likely to work?
I don't think it's going to work. Then how much are you going to pay the people to have children? The immigration probably can help, absolutely. It can be a way. Yes, why not? There must be a program anyway.
I was interested, Francesca, it's something that those people who have to work out future policies, what happens to the coming generations, must be thinking about now. What do they tell you?
We, as demographers, we've got the kind of duty to inform policymakers, to make sure policymakers are aware of future scenarios and therefore then can come up with plans that can fix the problem.
Well, do you see anything that gives you encouragement?
We are all living longer, which means that we are also living healthier life. What we need to do is making sure that all these people that are living longer are actually living healthier life. They're active, they are educated, they're living not in poverty, they've got the means to live this longer life. So we need to adjust the systems and the institutions to cope with these changes.
When we were growing up, we were told there was a danger of too many people on this planet. Are you quite surprised to see the reverse being put forward?
It is true that we are at the maximum in terms of population, but things are going to change, and they can change, and they will change, provided that there is some policies that support positive change. And with positive change, I mean women's empowerment, human rights, and if policy in all sides of the world, North but also the global South, work in that direction, then we can have a smaller population and the population that lives in a more sustainable way on this planet.
Francesca, I saw you nodding your head as if to say, well, yeah, we should have seen this coming. But are you surprised that it's become the reverse problem, that there are just too few people perhaps being born now? And what future is there for your children on these islands?
In Sardinia, I see a future. It's a highland, it's a big island. I think it can offer lots of opportunities. There are many business which can improve and can give you the chance to stay in this island. So I'm not afraid about my children's future.
On that semi-optimistic note, let's hear from Professor Sarah Harper, Professor of Gerontology, that's old people, at Oxford University, who says it's an extremely complicated issue. And in a few moments, we'll get into what some of the answers might be.
So the fact that we have more older adults in the population doesn't mean that our population is stagnating. It means that the population is different now than it was 30, 40 years ago, but all sorts of dynamics have caused that, not just the ageing of the population.
And what do we have to do to cope with that? Because if society is changing in so many different ways, then the needs of the individual also change.
Yes. Yeah.
How do we deal with that?
So one of the really big problems is that we have got 21st century problems and we have 20th century institutions. So our governments are very fixed, our education system is very fixed, even our healthcare tends to be quite fixed. Healthcare has become more flexible, I would say, of those three. And as a consequence, one can say that actually the attitudes and behaviours of individuals are changing much more than the institutions within which we live. And we can even take a simple institution of something like the family, for example. One of the issues that we now have, of course, is that the standard nuclear family in this country, or the multi-generational family that we still used to have, particularly in Southern Europe and many parts of Asia and Latin America, that has really been transformed over the last 20, 25 years. And all sorts of social changes have led into this. One of them, for example, is that we've seen an increase in divorce. We've seen an increase in many more men who are now having second families. So we have men in their 50s and 60s who have primary school children. We have women who are in their 40s having their first child. We also have women in their 40s who are becoming grandmothers. So we have far more fluid life courses, far more fluid social institutions like the family. So we live in a far more complex world, and yet we're slotted into education and then work and then retirement. And that's what's got to change.
So born, learn, work and die. Well, in this part of the programme we have two different guests with us, one of whom studies how we age and how we can improve the conditions of ageing. And Gabriele here, who's travelled a great deal, is Sardinian and has come back and finding some problems. Esther, let me ask you first of all. So Sarah Harper there was saying we need to change. If we don't change, the problems will get bigger. How do we change when it comes to an ageing population and falling birth rates?
So one of the really important tools that we have at ILC for answering that question is our Healthy Ageing Index. So we look at how long people live, how many of those years are healthy, and how many of those years they spend working. So in economic terms, we want to get people working for as long as possible to make sure that people have wealth to support themselves along their working life and also into retirement. So we found from this index that while Italy does incredibly well, it's in the top 10 for health span and lifespan, so people live longer and they live good, healthy years. They're barely in the top 100 for work span.
So perhaps they've got it right when it comes to work-life balance because they live a long time, they're healthy, and perhaps that's because they don't work quite so hard. I don't know, I'm oversimplifying perhaps?
We also have a happiness index where the UK actually does better than Italy.
Let me come to you, Gabriele, in this case. You've got a lovely smile. You've travelled a lot of time in New Zealand, in Mexico. You're back here now in Sardinia, finding it hard to get work. Do you recognise that quality of life for an islander here? Is it good?
I think overall we can say yes, it's good. The fact that I believe it's hard to find work, it just somehow translates into stress because obviously nowadays there is a lot of money involved to provide for yourself, but at the same time it's very easy to find produce and connect with your neighbors. Like for instance, I live near several people that make their own cheese, so for me it's very easy to just reach them and get cheese from them if I want to. Or like I have my own chickens, I can, there is possibilities to provide for yourself.
But things have changed, particularly since the advent of the digital world. That gives people a window onto other opportunities. Good thing or a bad thing?
Because I think it's good for someone that is looking for a better place where to be, that's looking for better reality, for a reality where they feel safer. But on the other hand, of course, people are running away from the island. They know that there is better opportunities abroad. They can comfortably find that opportunity sitting in their homes. Like you just open your laptop and search, and you can connect with people and find a job while you're sitting there, and then the next day you have a contract and you're ready to go. Like, so many people are leaving, and that translates into less and less community bonds.
If the people who love this island, the people who run this island, the people who run Italy want to encourage people to come back here, how do they do it?
Personally, I would like to see a better work policies. Like I would like as an employee to feel safer in the hands of an employer. I find myself constantly in a position where I hear friends of mine, or I find myself in the position where you're finding a job, you get a connection with someone, you go and speak, do the interview, and then they propose you something absurd. Like, I think there should be better care for employees.
Esther, let me come to you and some of your solutions here. I want to talk about 15-minute cities and ageism. Start with that one.
Some people describe it as the last acceptable ism. So across the life course, people might make assumptions about you, your capacity, your talents and your weaknesses based on the age that they perceive you to be. And that's very limiting in terms of the stereotypes about the kind of jobs that people want to be doing, and what people might have to balance alongside those jobs.
And there are, 1 million people in the UK that have gone missing after 50 who could and should be working, perhaps?
Well, this is the key question. What is stopping them working, and how does work have to balance with all of the caring responsibilities that we will have to ask people to take on? We're all going to need that community support throughout our lives. But if people can't balance work and their caring responsibilities, then something's going to have to give. And in this case, it is work for those missing million.
Okay, so they stop working because perhaps they've got to care for their elderly relatives. But if those elderly relatives don't have the younger people to look after them, they need to have facilities and help nearby. That's your 15-minute cities.
So this is sort of a policy question that's been bounced around for a couple of years now. It's quite a simple concept. You should be able to meet all of your needs in terms of your food, your health, your dentistry, that kind of thing, within 15 minutes, walking, public transport, bus, bike, that kind of thing.
So that deals to some extent with an ageing population that needs better help. How do you deal with falling birth rates and the fact that there aren't as many young people around as there used to be within those communities?
Absolutely. I think we took the example of Sardinia in that we had a couple of years where you weren't allowed to move around, and lots of us found, I can do my job if it is a remote, stereotypically white-collar job from home. What if I could do that from anywhere? What if I could take my remote work to an island like this, and I could support the local economy all throughout the year, as opposed to the 6-month window that is so important to the local economy here. But there are plenty of jobs where that's not an option. So with the advent of technology and all of the different ways that we can be working, we need to think seriously about what that might look like.
Let me come to you, Gabriele, on that very point. Digital working, I think, is really, or remote working is what Esther's referring to. And the authorities here on Sardinia, we've seen it ourselves, are encouraging people to do that by giving them tax breaks, paying them or asking them only to pay €1 a month rent if they come here and live in a remote community and do their work from there. Other incentives as well, like €600 a month for your firstborn child in those places. Do you think that's workable? Is it going to save the soul of Sardinia?
I think it's going to work to some extent.
Because these aren't Sardinians necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem.
Exactly. It's people from outside coming. I don't know. Like, I grew up going to school and we would not get taught Sardinian language, for instance. Right now, I found pretty hard to find a course I could join because I want to reconnect with the land. I want to reconnect with the language, and of course, many people coming from outside is gonna. I won't say pollute because I do believe in biodiversity, but
not pollute, but dilute.
Dilute, okay, yeah. And because I think it might boost a bit the economy. I think that as far as it will go, but saving the soul of Sardinia, I'm not sure if a better economy will translate in people be treated better.
Esther, I want to shift the conversation slightly. We've talked about a relatively small island here. We've talked about Italy. We've talked about some of the problems in Europe and Southeast Asia with falling birth rates. One place where that's not happening at the moment is sub-Saharan Africa. But I've had it suggested to me that is going to change, with people being more connected to the outside world, with better family planning, with a desire to move and make better lives for themselves. The birth rate in that part of Africa is actually going to slow down as well. What issues does that present?
We need the other demands on people's resources, their time, to adapt to that. So if you want the birth rate to go up, you need people to have the personal wealth, the living conditions, the house, and the community around them to make that happen.
We've looked at the problems, we've looked just now at some of the solutions. In the third part of this discussion, we're going to look at what happens if it's not sorted out. And Sarah Harper says, well, we're not going to collapse as societies.
I don't think that's going to happen, but what I do think will happen unless we do something is an awful lot of older people are going to suffer and have very low quality of life, low well-being, increased loneliness, depression in old age. Because obviously as a society can say, no, we're not going to put resources into caring for all these older adults.
Because one day, in fact, pretty soon, they're going to be gone and we won't have the same problem.
Absolutely. So I think if we're not careful, and in a caring society I believe that's wrong, if we're not careful we will just putting the burden onto older people and indeed onto their families. And that's the one thing I think the COVID-19 pandemic showed us, was that families actually care. And that if the state isn't there to care for sick people or look after people, then actually children, grandchildren, siblings, etc. will come in. So not only older people are going to be burdened by this, but also the family is going to be burdened by this. If we don't do something, and I think in a civilised society we should be doing something to ensure that people do have good well-being across their lives.
Well, I'd have to say that Sarah Harper there sounding sort of relatively optimistic, but in this section of the programme we are going to be the doom mongers. We're going to look at what happens if things don't change. Very pleased to say that Esther and Francesca are still with us, and we can welcome from Vienna Michael Harmon from the UN Population Fund. Do you hold the same view as Sarah Harper there, that actually things are going to be okay?
Look, last century population growth was described as a population bomb. More recently, population aging is described to be a population bomb. I don't think that's what it is. Aging is a demographic megatrend. It affects many things that we deeply care about in society. It has implications for labor markets, social protection systems, pensions, political culture, many other things. And ignoring it would be a mistake.
So birth rate going down in a lot of places, but not in France and the Nordic countries. What do you think the reason is for that, Michael?
To not have such a strong population decline as in other countries, three things have to be in place. One, people need to feel secure about their income relative to expenditures. Another important balance that has to be right is between the time we are able to allocate to our children, to raise them, to be with them, and the time we spend at work. The work-life balance has to be right. And the third balance that's really critical, there has to be a sharing of the responsibility of homework, housework, child rearing between women and men. In France, in the Nordic countries, many of these elements, these balances were right, and people had more children. But also their realities are catching up. Also their fertility levels are falling.
You were nodding, Francesca, as Michael was talking. What points would you like to enlarge upon?
I think a key term that he used was sharing. It referred to the sharing between the genders, but I think as a broader than that is sharing, learning to share between generation, and then also learning to share more globally between what we think of our local population and population coming from elsewhere.
Esther, you think there should be more state intervention, what some people unfortunately call the nanny state. Now, if you've got a family nucleus and everybody's looking after each other, you wouldn't necessarily need that. So you're saying if that nucleus goes, that's what's needed. And in what way?
So the sort of vision we have for, in particular, healthy ageing, because so many of the problems we will experience in the UK will build upon the problems we currently have with resourcing and demand upon our National Health Service. So much of the ill health that we are going to see in the coming decades, particularly from older populations, is avoidable. Why don't we have working practices that allow people to get their physical activity in the day, as opposed to cramming it in when they can? And why don't we combine older people's services and children's services, because we know that both are underfunded and under-resourced? What opportunities are there to make the best of what we already have?
But we have older people sharing same services with the younger people. You're solving two problems with one. You're keeping older people more active and therefore healthier, happier, but you're also providing a service to families with young children. And so you're kind of replacing the family unit.
State intervention, Michael, though, requires money. And healthcare hasn't got enough money because there are so many old people. It's self-perpetuating, isn't it? How do you change that?
We cannot rely solely on traditional intra-household support systems. There is a role that the state has to play to provide social protection, to extend social security to older persons, because many of the younger persons are not around. And of course, the younger persons also make contributions via the state to the older persons by paying taxes. So it's a different way of organizing the system. And I think it's a way, social protection is a way that corresponds more with the modern societies. The traditional support system will not last.
Something that I like to stress is aging is not a problem for older people of today. Aging is a problem for us adults, for our children. So we need to work for a better society and finding better ways to enact this sharing between the generations.
We're going to have a final word from Sarah Harper, who says it is what it is.
It's just the way of the world. It's just that we are transitioning from unhealthy, burgeoning populations into populations that are healthy, well-educated and able to be stewards of our planet.
From the dreaming spires of Oxford to the mountains of Sardinia, and a farmer we met who milks his cows by hand, goes out to collect them on horseback, bareback in fact, and who makes his own cheese. And I had a chance to ask him if he thought his way of life would still be there in 50 years. He sort of looked at me.
Tra 50 anni. Ottimista, tra 5. Io lo spero.
A young man who really loves what he does and hopes it will be here, even if he doesn't believe that that is likely. From all of us here, thank you for joining in the conversation. Thank you very much for watching. It was cold up on those hills. It's been coldish down here. We've got the fire, though, to keep us warm. From all of us on Beyond Borders, goodbye.